The opulent Royal Delacroix ballroom shimmered under a sea of hanging chandeliers, casting a golden glow on the carefully curated extravagance of New York's elite. Tonight was a charity gala, but no one here was truly focused on giving. It was a parade of status, wealth, and subtle rivalry. Damian Calloway, founder and CEO of Callaway Dynamics, adjusted the knot of his hand-stitched Marlowe and Jacobs tie, nodding absently at a colleague's stale joke. At 41, Damian had perfected the art of appearing engaged while mentally sorting through corporate forecasts and pending mergers. "Too bad Serena couldn't make it tonight," said Gerald Langston, chairman of Damian's board, swirling a glass of aged brandy. "Last-minute migraine," Damian replied smoothly, grateful for the excuse he'd prepared. Lately, Serena's possessive questioning after every social event had become unbearable. Coming alone tonight was a rare relief. A server drifted past with a silver tray of champagne flutes. Damian reached for one, but froze midway. He saw her, Celeste Morgan. Even after 3 years, he'd recognize her from across a continent. She wore a deep navy dress, understated and elegant, with her auburn hair cascading in soft waves. She stood out like a painting amid a gallery of overpriced forgeries. But it wasn't Celeste that turned Damian's blood cold. It was the 4 small boys surrounding her. Identical faces, identical expressions, identical eyes. His eyes. The signature Callaway storm gray irises. The same cleft in the chin, the same serious expressions. 4 miniature versions of himself stood at her side, their suits sharp, their shoes shiny, their presence impossible. "Damian, are you all right?" Gerald's voice sounded distant, irrelevant. The champagne server moved on. Damian didn't notice. He couldn't look away. The boys were about 5, just the right age. "I need a moment," Damian muttered, already moving. It was as if some gravitational force was pulling him across the ballroom, heart thudding in his chest like an unannounced drumbeat. Celeste looked up and locked eyes with him. Her face went pale. She whispered something to the boys, who turned. In unison, 4 pairs of identical storm gray eyes stared up at him, studying him as if he were a stranger who'd walked out of their dreams. One boy tugged at her dress. "Mom, who's that man?" Another squinted curiously. "He looks like us." Damian halted, breath caught in his throat. The low hum of Gala chatter faded into white noise. "Celeste," he finally managed, his voice thick, his jaw tight. "We need to talk." She straightened, wrapping one arm around 2 of the boys as the other stood close. "I wondered when this day would come," she said softly. He looked from one boy to the next, unable to finish the question. But it didn't matter. The answer was on every small familiar face. "Yes," she said. "They're yours." She turned slightly and gestured to each one. "That's Miles, in the blue, Julian in green, Theo in gray, and Rowan in red." Rowan, the smallest, or maybe just the most timid, half hid behind Celeste's leg, peeking at Damian with innocent curiosity. A flashbulb flickered. Someone had taken a photo of them, and it wasn't just any photo. It was the kind that could change everything if it hit the wrong hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" Damian asked, his voice lowered but intense. Anger warred with disbelief, longing tangled with guilt. A murmur swept through the ballroom as a new arrival entered. Serena. Clad in a striking crimson gown, she scanned the crowd like a hawk. Celeste followed his gaze. "Your date?" she asked coolly. "My fiancé," he corrected automatically, realizing too late how absurd that word sounded now. Serena hadn't seen them yet, but it was only a matter of seconds. "We need to get out of the spotlight," Damian said quickly, gesturing toward a side alcove. "Now." Celeste nodded. She whispered again to the boys, and they followed quietly, hands brushing hers, still stealing glances at him. The clamor of the gala dulled as they stepped into a quiet alcove behind heavy velvet curtains. Here the world felt smaller, just Damian, Celeste, and 4 little faces that bore undeniable evidence of his bloodline. The boys clung close to their mother, eyes flickering between awe and caution. Damien crouched to their level, overwhelmed. Which one is which again? Celeste pointed gently. Miles in blue, he's the natural leader. Julian, green, he's our little inventor. Theo, gray, an artist through and through. And Rowan in red, he's always moving. As if on cue, Rowan spun in a little circle, then reached for Celeste's hand. Miles stepped forward protectively, placing himself between Damien and his mother. Damien stood up slowly, the weight of his own silence dragging at his chest. Why didn't you tell me, Celeste? I tried, she said sharply but not unkindly. Her voice trembled with memory. After our divorce was finalized, I called your office 17 times. Your assistant, what was her name? Trina, blocked me. I sent certified letters, 3 of them. Everyone returned unopened. That's not possible, Damien muttered. But even as he said it, he remembered Trina. Fiercely loyal, aggressively gatekeeping. Had she decided he didn't need to hear from his ex-wife? Maybe it wasn't your fault at first, Celeste said. But after a while I stopped trying. I had 4 boys to raise. And they deserved better than a father who never called back. His jaw clenched. You don't know what I would have done. No, she cut in, her voice low. I don't, because I was alone. Before Damien could respond, a small voice interrupted. I'm hungry, said Julian, tugging at Celeste's dress. Me too, echoed Rowan. Theo stared up at Damien with large, solemn eyes, not saying a word. Damien turned to a nearby server. Excuse me, would you mind showing these young gentlemen where the chocolate fountain is? The server smiled kindly. Of course. Would you boys like some treats? All 4 looked at Celeste for permission. Go ahead, she said gently. But stay close. The boys shuffled off with the server, heads swiveling as they walked, still sneaking glances at Damien. You named them all yourself? He asked once they were alone. I didn't exactly have a team of brainstormers, she said, crossing her arms. Quadruplet pregnancies aren't exactly easy. Damien dragged a hand through his hair. If I had known. But you didn't, she snapped, then softened. And maybe that's not entirely your fault, but you should know. I never wanted to raise them alone. I just didn't have a choice. Before Damien could answer, his phone vibrated. The ER screen lit up. Serena. He declined the call, but Celeste had already seen the name. Does she know? She asked quietly. About them? She doesn't, Damien replied, because until 5 minutes ago I didn't either. Celeste sighed, her shoulders tightening. They've lived 5 years without you. Don't make promises you won't keep now. I won't. His voice was gravel. I want to know them, Celeste. All of them. A small laugh and a burst of chocolate-smeared energy signaled the return of the boys. They ran back, laughing, and pointing at the ice sculpture in the center of the ballroom. Just as Damien was about to smile, the moment was shattered. There you are, darling. Serena's voice sliced through the air. She appeared at his side, perfect in every visible way. Sleek crimson dress, glossed lips, a diamond bracelet he'd bought her just last week. Her gaze flicked to Celeste, then to the boys. Then it clicked. 1. Look at the boys' matching storm gray eyes, and her smile vanished. What is this? She whispered. The 4 boys returned to Celeste, chocolate still smudged on their faces. Mom, said Miles, eyeing Serena. Who's she? Damien felt Serena's nails dig into his arm. Her voice dropped to a hiss. What have you done? Serena, not here. Damien tried to explain, but Theo stepped forward. I'm Theo Calloway, he said, his small voice polite but proud. These are my brothers. Calloway? Serena choked, stepping back as if burned. Yes, Celeste said, her chin lifted. They carry their father's name. Serena turned to Damien, rage replacing confusion. Is this a joke? Let's discuss this somewhere private, Damien urged, but Serena was already storming off, heels clacking like gunshots against the marble floor. As Damien stared after her, he felt a small tug on his sleeve. He turned to see Theo's big gray eyes locked on his. Are you really our dad? The boy asked softly. Damien crouched down again. I think I am, he said, voice thick. Theo studied him, then reached out with a tiny hand. I'm Theo. I draw things. Damien shook the little hand with reverence. I'd love to see your drawings. They're really good, Rowan chimed in. He drew me riding a dragon yesterday. Dragons aren't real, Julian corrected. They don't have to be, Miles said. It's art. Damien watched them, his sons, laughing, debating dragons, arguing like they'd known each other forever. I should go talk to Serena, he said reluctantly to Celeste. You should, she agreed. But Damien, she hesitated. This can't be another passing priority. If you're in, you're all in. I want to be, he said, watching the 4 little boys who had unknowingly shattered and redefined his world. As if on cue, his phone buzzed again. An unknown number. He checked it. A photo. It was a picture of him crouched beside Theo, Celeste just behind him, the other boys nearby. The caption, Tech Mogul Secret Family, exclusive. How much is this worth? What is it? Celeste asked, seeing his face pale. Damien turned the screen toward her. Her breath caught. Someone's watching us, she whispered. And unless we act fast, Damien said, voice dark with determination, this story could break by morning. Damien led Celeste and the boys through a side hallway to a quieter corridor off the main ballroom. As they walked, he couldn't stop glancing down at the 4 identical faces looking up at him. Curiosity sparkled in each set of storm-gray eyes, his eyes, though each boy wore a distinct expression that hinted at their unique personalities. He paused, turning to Celeste. Which one is which again? She pointed as they paused near. A large decorative mirror. Miles in blue. He's the eldest by 4 minutes and acts like he's 10 years older. Julian in green is our little scientist. Theo in gray doesn't say much, but he draws constantly. And Rowan. She smiled faintly. He's our blur of motion in red. He's never still. Right on cue, Rowan twirled twice and nearly bumped into a passing waiter. Damien caught him by the shoulders gently. Hey there, future tornado, he said softly. Miles immediately stepped closer to Celeste, positioning himself like a little bodyguard between her and Damien. The moment was surreal. For years, Damien had built an empire, conquered markets, crushed competition, but nothing had prepared him for being looked at by 4 small boys who bore his face. His voice dropped as he looked back at Celeste. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, Damien. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered. You think this was easy? After our divorce, I called your office again and again. Your assistant blocked me. Trina, Damien muttered. The name now struck a very different note in his mind. I sent certified letters, Celeste continued. 3, all returned unopened. Damien shook his head slowly. That doesn't make sense. I would have. Would you have? She cut in. You were launching Callaway's European division, on magazine covers, giving keynote speeches. You didn't even show up to sign the final divorce papers, and your lawyer did. You made it clear your company came first. He inhaled sharply. I didn't know. Celeste, I swear if I had. Before he could finish, Julian piped up from behind. Mom, I'm starving. Me too, Rowan echoed, bouncing on his toes. Theo remained quiet, his eyes locked on Damien, observing like he was sketching the man in his mind. Damien flagged down a passing server. Could you take these gentlemen to the dessert table, especially the chocolate fountain? The server smiled warmly. Of course, who wants sweets? All 4 boys looked to their mother for approval. Celeste nodded. Go ahead, but stay where I can see you. They ran off like a pack of hungry puppies, but not before Miles turned to give Damien one last searching glance. You named them all yourself? Damien asked when they were alone. She crossed her arms. I didn't have a choice. The pregnancy must have been hard. You think? She scoffed. Try being hospitalized twice before they were even born. Then try raising 4 boys, on your own without so much as a returned phone call. Damien ran his hand through his hair. I would have helped. I still will. Do I know that? Celeste asked, voice tight. Because the man I divorced didn't make time for anything but power and press conferences. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. Serena. He silenced it, but Celeste had already seen the name flash across the screen. So, she said dryly. She doesn't know about your kids either. No, Damien replied. Because, until 10 minutes ago, I didn't. Her features softened, if only slightly. I stopped trying after the first year. It just hurt too much. They needed someone reliable, not someone unreachable. I never said I didn't want them, he said, his voice cracking. I just never knew they existed. From the main ballroom, a ripple of gasps rose. Not from the music or the charity auction. Something, or someone, had just entered. Uh-oh, Celeste murmured. Damien turned. Serena. She stood tall, poised and immaculate in a crimson gown. Her eyes scanned the room like a trained sniper, and they landed right on them. He saw the flicker of confusion, recognition, then pure fury bloom across her face. There you are, darling, Serena said as she approached, her voice laced with fake sweetness. Her arm looped through his possessively before she turned her sharp gaze toward Celeste. Damien opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the boys returned. Julian was covered in chocolate. Rowan carried a half-eaten macaron. Miles and Theo trailed behind. The 4 of them came to a halt, unsure who Serena was. Mom, Miles asked with narrowed eyes. Who's that lady? Serena's expression contorted as she looked from boy to boy. Her grip on Damien's arm tightened. What is this? She hissed. Serena, let's talk. But Theo stepped forward again, calm and direct. I'm Theo Calloway. These are my brothers. Calloway, Serena echoed, voice shaking. Celeste met her gaze with quiet strength. They carry their father's name. Serena paled. You have children? I just found out, Damien began. This is some sick joke, she spat. Miles stepped in front of Celeste again. We're not a joke, he said firmly. Serena recoiled. You said she was your ex-wife. She is, Damien confirmed, and these are my sons. Serena's eyes blazed. Unbelievable. You kept this from me? I didn't know, he growled. I swear to you, I only just... You're a liar, she seethed. You lied to me, to the media, to everyone. She spun, heels clacking, cutting through the crowd like a dagger. Serena, wait. But it was no use. She was gone. The gala guests had started to notice the scene. Whispers bloomed like wildfire. Phones were coming out. As Damien turned back, Theo reached out again, gentle and curious. Are you really our dad? Damien knelt. Yes, he said, choking on the emotion. I believe I am. Theo nodded solemnly, then extended his small hand. I draw things. Damien took it, holding it as carefully as one would a fragile piece of glass. I'd like to see your drawings. They're really good, Rowan said. He drew a spaceship with me inside. Spaceships aren't real, Julian muttered. They don't have to be, Miles countered. It's art. Damien stared at the 4 of them, arguing, laughing. Perfect. He felt his phone buzz again. Unknown number. He checked it. A photo, from moments earlier, of him and Theo, with Celeste and the boys in the background. Captioned, Billionaire's hidden family. Ready to talk terms before we go public? He showed it to Celeste. Someone's following us, she said grimly. And unless we act fast, Damien said, tone steely, they're going to drag the boys into the tabloids. Her hand instinctively went to her chest. They don't deserve that. No, Damien agreed, fire rising in his chest. They don't. He looked down at the 4 little faces once again, his sons, now watching them carefully. We need to get them out of here. Now. Damien rode with Celeste and the boys in a black SUV, flanked by a discreet private security vehicle. The further they got from the glittering madness of the Royal Delacroix ballroom, the more the tension in his chest began to shift. Not vanish. Just change. Rowan leaned sleepily against Celeste in the back seat. Miles sat upright beside her, scanning the city lights like he was memorizing every turn. Julian fiddled with a tiny circuit board in his lap, and Theo, quiet as always, stared out the window, sketchpad clutched in his arms. Celeste's apartment was on a tree-lined street in Astoria, far removed from Damien's sleek Manhattan skyline view. The building was modest, old, brick, and humming with the soft sounds of lived-in warmth. "I know it's not a penthouse," Celeste said as they stepped inside, "but it's home." The elevator groaned as it carried them up to the 4th floor. Inside the apartment, the scent of cinnamon and old books welcomed them. Toys were scattered across the hardwood floors, blankets draped over the armrest of a well-worn sofa. The sink held breakfast dishes. The place was cluttered, chaotic, and alive. "They're in their room," Celeste said, taking off her coat. "I told them you'd be coming." Damien froze mid-step. "You told them I was their father?" She nodded. "They deserve to know, and frankly, they've had questions ever since they saw you." A bedroom door down the hall creaked open and Rowan poked his head out, his tousled curls slightly damp with sweat. "He's here," he called. The other 3 appeared quickly behind him. Theo held a pencil tucked behind one ear. Julian's shirt was on inside out. Miles stood at the front again, assessing Damien with wide, cautious eyes. "Hi," Damien said, suddenly unsure how to speak to 4 children who were technically strangers, and biologically his own. Miles stepped forward first. "Are you staying this time?" The question landed like a stone in Damien's chest. "I didn't know about you before," he said, crouching. "But now that I do, yes. I'm staying." Miles studied him, then gave a small, satisfied nod. Julian emerged holding his half-built robot. "Can you help me fix this? Mom doesn't know how circuits work." "I'd love to," Damien said, and was surprised to hear how much he meant it. Theo stood at the edge of the hallway. He didn't say anything, but his eyes never left Damien. Not once. Just then, Damien's phone buzzed again. A message from James Lerner, his legal counsel. "Kingston spotted entering our building. Already approached 2 board members. Looks like he's pushing hard." The business world hadn't paused to let him breathe. But as Theo held up a drawing, 5 stick figures, 4 small and 1 tall, Damien realized something. Right now, this was what mattered most. The dining table was now a makeshift strategy war room. Damien sat at one end reviewing legal reports. Celeste moved fluidly between the kitchen and the living area, carrying mugs of tea and whispering quiet instructions to the boys, who had been corralled into their room for now. Victor Song, Damien's head of security, stood by the window, surveying the street below. Margot Lane, his trusted executive assistant, had her tablet out, tapping furiously while murmuring updates. "Kingston's met with 2 board members already," Margot said, brushing a lock of gray hair behind her ear. "He's pitching this story as a character issue. Unfit leadership, financial scandal." Damien clenched his jaw. "He's using my kids as leverage. I'm not letting him turn them into a scandal." "You may not have a choice," James said, pacing. "The story's already leaking. We need to get ahead of it. A press release, public statement, maybe even a sit-down interview." "No," Celeste cut in sharply from the kitchen. Everyone turned. "I won't let you use them for damage control." The room fell silent. Damien looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same fire that had once pulled him in years ago. That same strength had raised 4 boys without him. "She's right," Damien said finally, surprising even himself. "We don't turn this into a PR spin. We protect the boys." Just then, the hallway thundered with little feet. Rowan burst into the room wearing a towel tied like a cape, arms outstretched. "I'm a plane." He skidded to a halt at the sight of so many adults. "Who are they?" he asked, pointing at Margot and James. Damien knelt again. These are my friends. They're helping us with a problem. Rowan considered this, then nodded. I help fix problems too. Just ask Mom. Celeste chuckled. That's debatable. Margot watched Rowan dart back down the hallway, her usual stern expression softening. They're remarkable, she said. All four of them. Celeste's eyes met Damien's. That's why I fought so hard to protect them. Victor stepped away from the window, voice low. Sir, Serena's car just pulled up outside. Damien swore under his breath. She shouldn't know this address, Margot said. She must have followed you, Victor suggested. Celeste's posture stiffened. I'll talk to her. No, Damien said, already standing. This is my mess. I'll handle it. Downstairs, Serena stood outside the building, a storm in heels. Her platinum hair was immaculate, her coat cinched at the waist like armor. She held her phone in one hand and pure venom in the other. You've been ignoring my calls, she snapped as he stepped outside. I've been busy, Damien said evenly. With your new family, she seethed. How convenient. Think carefully about what you're about to say, Damien warned. You think this circus won't ruin you? She hissed. You've destroyed everything we've built. What we built? He repeated, a bitter laugh escaping. You mean your plans, your image, your perfect little illusion? She flinched. I'm protecting my children, he continued. From becoming front-page gossip, from vultures like Kingston, and from people who only ever saw me as a trophy. Serena's eyes narrowed. Those children are strangers, you don't owe them anything. Damien's voice turned ice. They're my blood. I owe them everything. She stared at him, mascara smudged beneath one eye, rage melting into something darker. Defeat. This isn't over, she whispered. Actually, Damien said, stepping back toward the building. It is. As he rode the elevator back up, his phone buzzed again, a calendar alert he had just created that morning. Miles, Solar System Project Presentation, 1 p.m. His gaze softened. He texted Margot. Reschedule board meeting. I'll be at my son's presentation. When he stepped back into the apartment, Celeste looked up from a pile of school papers. She tilted her head. Everything all right? He smiled, already planning the next day around solar systems and chocolate. Fountains. I'm where I'm supposed to be. At precisely 5:57 a.m., Damien Calloway's phone rang, dragging him out of a dream where he was teaching the boys how to fish, something he'd never done but now longed to experience. It was Margot. Turn on Channel 6, she said. No greeting. Her voice clipped. Still half asleep in his suite, a newly rented apartment near Celeste's, Damien fumbled for the remote. The screen lit up to breaking news. Tech tycoon, Damien Calloway's secret quadruplets exposed. A slick anchor's voice filled the room. Callaway Dynamics CEO Damien Calloway, one of New York's most powerful billionaires, is reportedly the father of identical quadruplets, previously unknown to the public. Sources claim the children were hidden from him for years. His phone vibrated again. This time it was Celeste. There are reporters outside my building, she said. Her voice was tight, trembling. The boys are scared. Someone's pounding on our door. Damien was already throwing on a sweatshirt. Don't answer, I'm coming now. By the time his car pulled up outside the building in Astoria, a media circus had erupted. Cameras swiveled as the SUV arrived, reporters swarming with aggressive energy. Mr. Calloway, did you abandon your children? Is this why your engagement with Serena Hart ended? Will you seek custody? His security team formed a barrier, guiding him quickly through the crowd and up to the apartment. Inside, chaos reigned. The boys, still in pajamas, were huddled on the couch. The television blared the same story on 3 different networks. Miles turned it off when he saw Damien enter. Celeste stood near the window, tense, hands balled into fists. Theo's soft voice broke the silence. Why are they saying mean things about Mom? Damien knelt beside the boys. Because sometimes grown-ups get excited about news and forget to be kind, Rowan bounced nervously on the sofa. The lady at the door was really loud. She scared me. No one's going to bother you anymore, Damien promised. He wasn't entirely sure how he'd keep that vow, but it didn't matter. He would find a way. His phone rang again. James Lerner. The board's calling an emergency meeting. They want answers, and they want them today. Damien sighed, glancing back at Celeste. I'll handle it. He returned to the boys. I have to go to work for a bit, he said gently. But I'll be back soon and we'll figure this out. Together. Nathan pushed his glasses up. Are you in trouble because of us? The question nearly broke him. No, Damien said firmly, his voice catching. Never. You four are the best thing that's ever happened to me. The Callaway Dynamics boardroom buzzed with tension as Damien entered. 12 faces stared at him, a mix of curiosity, concern, and quiet judgment. He didn't wait for formalities. Yes, he began. I recently discovered I have 4 sons. No, I didn't know about them until last week. Yes, I intend to be fully involved in their lives from now on. There was a long silence. Then Gerald Langston, the chairman, spoke. Damien, while your personal life is your own, this company's public image is strengthened, Damien interrupted, by a CEO who takes responsibility. I'm not hiding my children. I'm proud of them. One of the younger board members frowned. The stock has already dropped 3 points since the story broke. It will recover, Damien said, when investors see that my leadership hasn't wavered. In fact, I've gained clarity. He paused. Effective immediately, I'm restructuring my schedule. I'll be leaving the office by 5 p.m. daily to spend time with my sons. Any after-hours matters will be handled by my executive team. The board sat in stunned silence. The idea for a press conference hadn't come from Damien. It had come from Miles. Dad, why don't you just tell everyone the truth, he'd asked over breakfast. That's what my teacher says to do when people spread lies. And so, 3 days after the story broke, Damien stood before a wall of cameras in the Callaway Dynamics press room. Celeste sat in the front row, composed but anxious. The boys were at home, watching with Margot. Thank you all for coming, he began, adjusting his tie. Rather than respond to speculation, I want to share the truth. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. Last week I learned I am the father of 4 incredible boys, Miles, Julian, Theo, and Rowan. Their mother, Celeste Morgan, and I were previously married. Our divorce was finalized before she discovered she was pregnant. Despite her efforts, miscommunication prevented me from learning about my children until now. He let the words settle. There was no deception, no scandal, just a tragic failure in communication. But now that I know, I will be part of their lives. Fully. A reporter raised her hand. What about the allegations from Serena Hart that Ms. Morgan hid the children for financial gain? Damien's eyes hardened. Those allegations are false. Ms. Hart is no longer affiliated with me personally or professionally. Another asked, will this affect your ability to run Callaway Dynamics? I remain fully committed to this company, Damien said. But I'm also committed to being a father. I've implemented changes to ensure both roles are fulfilled. He paused, then delivered the final announcement. In fact, today I'm proud to introduce a new initiative, the Callaway Family Foundation, which will support single parents and educational opportunities for children nationwide. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Ms. Morgan will serve as the foundation's director. Her experience, both personal and professional, makes her uniquely qualified. As the questions shifted from scandal to strategy, Damien glanced at Celeste. She raised a brow. Director of your foundation? He smiled. Spur-of-the-moment decision, good one, I hope. She narrowed her eyes, but the corners of her mouth lifted. Competitive salary? Extremely, he grinned. You do realize this sounds like you trying to support me without just handing me a check? Is that a problem? Not if it's a good cause. As they walked out together, Celeste said quietly, You were good up there. But I noticed you didn't mention the embezzlement. Strategic omission, Damien replied. Kingston, and Serena are hoping I'll be too distracted to pursue charges. And are you? His phone buzzed. A message from Margot. Boy's asking when you're coming. Nathan says his robot is ready to win this time. Damien smiled. No, he said. I've just learned what actually matters. The townhouse had charm. That was Celeste's first thought as she stepped into the entryway, followed closely by Damien. Warm wood floors, high ceilings, and sunlight filtering through large windows. It felt more like a home than any place she'd seen in years. The real estate agent, a chipper woman named Lena Forrest, gestured around with a well-practiced flourish. The previous owners renovated everything last year, 4 bedrooms upstairs, perfect for the boys, and a master suite on the main floor. Celeste's fingers trailed along the edge of the marble kitchen island. After 2 weeks of viewings that had all felt either too cold, too lavish, or too cramped, this was the first one that made her pause. There's a small backyard, Lena added, opening sliding glass doors. Not massive, but safe and enclosed. Ideal for kids. The space beyond featured a tidy patch of lawn, a few raised flower beds, and a covered patio. Damien stepped outside, taking it in, and already imagining a basketball hoop, maybe a swing set or even a treehouse down the line. It's 3 blocks from the boys' school, Celeste murmured, and 15 minutes from your new apartment. My office, too, Damien said. He turned to Lena. Could you give us a moment? Of course, she beamed. I'll be in the foyer. Once she disappeared, Celeste looked around, her arms folding. It's beautiful, Damien, but this is a big step, he nodded. I know. You could buy them a castle if you wanted. That's not the point. She glanced toward the hallway where the sounds of faint laughter echoed from another showing family upstairs. This isn't just for them, is it? She asked. No, Damien admitted. I need a space where they can be with me, not just on weekends or during planned outings. A place where they belong. Celeste hesitated, her gaze softening. It's generous. Maybe too generous. It's not generosity, he said gently. It's responsibility. And something else, too. Their eyes met. Not romantic. Not yet. But filled with the unspoken understanding that life had shifted, permanently. I'll take it, Damien told the agent. Later that evening, they pulled up to Celeste's apartment, the boys practically vibrating, with excitement in the back seat. As soon as the car stopped, Rowan launched himself at Damien for a hug. I beat everyone at tag today, he announced. Nathan jumped in next. My robot works this time, I swear. Julian asked about the house, firing off a dozen questions before Celeste had even unbuckled her seatbelt. Theo, as always, didn't say much, just handed Damien another drawing. It was a house. 4 children playing in the yard, a man standing at the door. You knew? Damien asked, touched. Theo shrugged. I just knew you'd find it today. Inside, after pizza and an animated family movie that ended with all 4 boys passed out on the living room floor, Celeste and Damien carefully moved them to bed. Damien carried Theo limp with sleep, his head resting on Damien's shoulder like it belonged there. As he laid him gently down, he whispered, I never knew it could feel like this. Celeste tucked the blanket around Theo. Like what? Complete, Damien said softly. Like everything before this was just the setup. The next morning, Damien's phone rang as he stood at Celeste's kitchen counter. It was James. Vanessa's lawyer reached out, he said. They're offering a deal. 70% of the stolen funds returned if we agree to drop charges. Celeste raised an eyebrow as she stirred her coffee. What are you going to say? Damien didn't hesitate. Tell them I want 90% and a signed non-disclosure agreement. If they refuse, we go public and press full criminal charges. He ended the call and turned to Celeste. You really would have gone to war with her before, she said, no matter the fallout. I probably would have, he admitted. But I'm not the same man anymore. She studied him for a long moment. No, you're not. That afternoon, as the boys played in the living room, Celeste sifted through financial documents on her laptop while Damien reviewed internal reports. She frowned at the screen. "These transactions," she murmured. "What?" Damien leaned over her shoulder. "These recurring transfers. They're disguised as vendor payments, but the vendors don't exist. They're siphoning off small percentages, and exactly 3%, every third Tuesday." Damien's stomach sank. Vanessa was a co-signer on several accounts. She had access to almost everything. "Exactly," Celeste said. "The pattern was clever. Small enough to go unnoticed, large enough to add up." "How much?" she typed furiously, calculating. "Millions." Damien raked a hand through, his hair, guilt simmering. "And I never saw it. I let her manage our personal finances because it was convenient." "You trusted her," Celeste said. "But this wasn't your mistake alone." He exhaled. "Where did the money go?" She clicked again. "Offshore accounts. Cayman Islands, classic." A text from James popped up on Damien's screen. Kingston was seen entering Vanessa's building. "They're working together." Celeste's expression hardened. She wasn't just stealing. She was feeding him intel. "My ex-girlfriend and my corporate rival," Damien muttered. "That's a hell of a partnership." Theo appeared in the doorway, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled, his stuffed triceratops clutched in one hand. "I had a bad dream," he said softly. Damien looked at Celeste, who nodded. "Come on, kiddo," he said gently. "Let's get you back to bed." Theo slipped his hand into Damien's, small and warm. "There were shadows," he whispered. "They were chasing me." "Shadows can't hurt you," Damien replied, leading him down the hall. "They're just darkness where light hasn't reached yet." Theo blinked up at him. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" The question, so simple, hit Damien like a freight train. "Of course," he said. As he sat beside the bed, watching Theo drift off, Damien realized that in the chaos of embezzlement, scandal, and betrayal, he'd stumbled into the life he never knew he was missing. He hadn't just discovered 4 sons, he'd rediscovered himself. Damien straightened his tie as the elevator ascended to the executive floor of Callaway Dynamics. The memory of that morning still clung to him. 4 giggling boys jumping on him at dawn, their laughter echoing through Celeste's apartment like birdsong. He hadn't slept in his sleek penthouse in days, preferring the couch near the chaos of crayons, cereal spills, and pillow forts. As the elevator doors slid open, Margot met him with her usual efficient stride and a clipboard clutched in hand. "She's here," she whispered. "And she brought her lawyer." Damien's jaw tightened. He walked into his office to find Vanessa Hart seated calmly across from his desk, perfectly manicured, dressed in a sharp gray pantsuit. Beside her sat Bradley Peterson, a corporate attorney with the personality of a predator. Damien recognized him from previous acquisition negotiations and had never trusted him. Vanessa rose, her expression carefully pleasant. "Damien, finally." He didn't return the smile. "Vanessa." Bradley gestured to the folder on the desk. "Mr. Callaway, we understand you've raised concerns regarding Ms. Hart's role in certain financial discrepancies." Damien calmly placed his briefcase on the desk and opened it. "They're not concerns, they're documented facts." He slid a thick folder across the table. Peterson flipped through the pages, eyebrows arching with each turn. Offshore transfers, fake vendor accounts, meeting logs, communications with Kingston Ventures. The web was woven tight and clear. Vanessa's face began to lose its practiced composure. 3% every third Tuesday, Damien said coldly. "Very creative, but not clever enough." "You can't prove I did this," she snapped, voice cracking. "The digital trail leads directly to your devices, your passwords, your logins." He leaned forward. "You've been stealing from me and feeding intel to my biggest rival." Vanessa's facade crumbled, her voice dropping to a whisper. "After everything we built..." "There is no we, Vanessa," Damien said. "There never was." I see that now. She stood abruptly. You're choosing them over me. I'm choosing what's right. You'll regret this. No, he said, stepping around the desk. The only thing I regret is not seeing it sooner. At that moment, James entered the office, followed by 2 security officers. Ms. Hart, your building access has been revoked. These gentlemen will escort you out. Vanessa turned to Peterson, who remained seated, his face unreadable. This isn't over, she hissed. Actually, Damien said, it is. As the door slammed shut behind them, his phone buzzed. A text from Celeste. Miles wants to know if you're still coming. He's nervous about his science presentation. Damien replied instantly. Tell him I wouldn't miss it. Be there, in 30. With pizza. At Sunnyside Elementary, Damien slipped into a tiny seat at the back of the classroom just as the kids were setting up their science fair projects. Celeste waved him over with a subtle smile. Miles stood beside a spinning solar system model, wires sticking out of the base. His face lit up when he saw Damien. That's my dad, he told his classmates proudly. Damien felt something swell, in his chest and not ego. Something deeper, something real. The presentation went perfectly. Miles explained each planet, his voice trembling at first, then growing stronger. When the model's motor whirred to life, the other kids clapped. Damien recorded every second on his phone. Afterward, he knelt beside Miles. You were incredible. Miles grinned. You came. I told you I would. 3 days later, Damien sat in Celeste's kitchen again. The boys were asleep after a wild afternoon of robot testing and popsicle-fueled chaos. He and Celeste pored over the last of the financial documents. Everything had been submitted. Vanessa and Kingston were cornered. It's over, she said. Finally, Damien nodded. We won't hear from them again, not after what we have on them. Celeste stretched. I still can't believe this is real. You here, the boys upstairs, this life. Neither can I. He hesitated, then pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket. What's this? A deed, he said. To the townhouse. She blinked. You bought it? I want it to be our home, Damien said quietly. Not just for visits, for real. Celeste stared at the envelope, then at him. You're serious. I've never been more serious. Later that night, Damien tucked the boys into bed. Rowan had fallen asleep mid-sentence. Julian clutched a half-assembled gadget. Theo had a pencil still in hand. Miles mumbled about stars and gravity in his sleep. Damien stood in the dim hallway, watching them. He didn't hear Celeste approach until she whispered, You okay? I was just thinking, he said, voice low. I used to believe success meant outworking everyone else, sacrificing time, relationships, everything. But I was wrong. She leaned against the doorframe. You can't get those years back. No, he agreed, but I can show up for every single one from here on. Their eyes met. No more need for promises. The proof was in the quiet house, the warmth in every room, and the soft breaths of sleeping boys. Damien had found his balance, not between power and family, but in replacing one with the other. 2 weeks in the new townhouse had brought joy, exhaustion, and the kind of mess Damien Calloway used to pay other people to clean. Now he stepped between Miles and Rowan as they shouted over a ruined science model in the living room. Lucas put glue in my solar system. I did not. Connor's lying. Damien crouched down, hands on his knees, looking between them. Okay. Deep breath. Miles, tell me what happened. Miles crossed his arms. I left my model on the table and now Jupiter's stuck to Saturn. I was fixing it, Rowan insisted. Jupiter was falling off. Damien resisted the urge to chuckle. 1 month ago, his biggest daily stress had been negotiating international software rights. Now it was planetary sabotage between 5-year-olds. Rowan, we don't touch other people's projects without asking, he said gently. Miles, I know you're upset, but accusing without asking isn't fair either. Both boys gave reluctant nods. Can you try to fix it together? I'll help once my meeting ends. Grumbling, they returned to the table, glue and planets in hand. Damien checked his watch and stepped into his new home office, leaving the door cracked so he could still hear their voices. Just in case. "Mr. Calloway?" came the voice of Mrs. Winston, the boy's kindergarten teacher, as she appeared on Damien's video screen. "Please call me Damien," he said. "Is everything all right?" She hesitated. "It's about Theo." Damien sat up straighter. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong," she said delicately. "But I've noticed Theo prefers to be alone during recess. He doesn't interact much. With the other kids, he stays by himself and draws." Damien frowned. "He's always been the quiet one, but is he unhappy?" "Not exactly. Just isolated. I wanted to mention it in case there's anything happening at home that might be affecting him emotionally." "Thank you for telling me," Damien said sincerely. "We'll talk to him." After the call, he remained in his chair, staring at the family drawing Theo had taped to his office wall. A perfect rendering of 5 stick figures, each brother uniquely detailed, and one taller figure with glasses and tousled hair. Him. That. Night after stories and snacks, Damien noticed Theo still awake. He sat cross-legged on his bed, sketching under the soft glow of a desk lamp. "Can't sleep?" Damien asked, gently lowering himself beside the boy. Theo shook his head without looking up, pencil moving swiftly. "Mrs. Winston says you're the best artist in class." A small shrug. "She also said you're spending a lot of time alone." This time the pencil paused. "The other kids are too loud," Theo whispered. "They don't get my pictures." Damien nodded slowly. "Is it hard, being different from your brothers?" Theo's eyes flicked up. "Sometimes. Everyone sees us as the same, but I'm not." He tapped his small chest. "I feel different. Here. Mom says I'm like you. Quiet." Damien's throat tightened. "She's right," he said. "When I was your age, I watched everything. I didn't say much either. I still don't sometimes." Theo studied him. "Did people think you were weird?" "Some did. But being quiet isn't a weakness, Theo. It's a strength. It means you see things others miss." He reached out and gently turned the sketch pad. The drawing was incredible. The whole family in the new backyard, each brother mid-action. Even the facial expressions were distinct. "You see people as they really are," Damien said. "This is a gift." Theo's smile was small but real. "Can we draw together? Just us?" "I'd like that very much." As Theo finally drifted off, Damien sat beside him in silence, heart full. He wasn't just learning how to be a father. He was rediscovering who he used to be. The next morning erupted like a storm. Damien's phone buzzed nonstop. 17 missed calls, 32 messages. Kingston made his move. James said grimly over the phone. "Leaked fake financials. Tabloid headlines already up. Calloway hiding assets through secret family." The article featured photos of the townhouse, wild speculation about financial fraud, and, worst of all, quotes from an unnamed source suggesting Celeste had orchestrated everything. "Vanessa," Damien muttered, his blood cold. "They're still working together." "They're trying to tank the stock before next week's merger vote," James said. "Board called another emergency meeting. 7 a.m. tomorrow." Later, Celeste sat beside him on the couch reading the article. Her face paled as she scrolled. "This is brutal." "The boys saw the news this morning," Damien said. "Theo was hiding in his closet with a crumpled newspaper. He thought this was all his fault." Celeste's breath caught. "No, I can't let this go on," Damien said. "Tomorrow I make a choice." At dawn, Damien entered the boardroom. Tension clung to the air like smoke. "This has gone too far," said Patricia Chen, head of the audit committee. "These accusations are serious." "And false," Damien said firmly. "All financials are clean, all taxes filed. This is a calculated smear by Kingston to destabilize our company." He slid a thick file across the table. "Inside you'll find proof of Kingston and Vanessa's partnership. Fabricated leaks, fraud, espionage, everything." The board members flipped through the evidence, expressions shifting. "But," Damien continued, "the fact remains. My family is now a target, and the company is caught in the crossfire." "What are you suggesting?" Gerald asked cautiously. I'm stepping down as CEO, Damien said quietly. Effective immediately. Shock swept across the room. I'll remain chairman overseeing long-term strategy, but day-to-day leadership will pass to Maya Davidson. She's more than ready. This feels like surrender, Patricia said. No, Damien replied. It's defense of my company and of my sons. He gestured toward the window where 4 small boys, visible in the backyard across the street, were trying to build a rocket out of cardboard under Celeste's watchful eye. They spent 5 years without a father. I won't miss another day. 6 months later, the Callaway summer house echoed with laughter. Miles orchestrated a sandcastle fort. Julian recorded wave patterns on a waterproof notebook. Rowan somersaulted through the surf. Theo, perched on a driftwood log, sketched quietly. Look at them, Celeste said, handing Damien a mug of coffee as they sat on the porch. They're thriving. They needed you, Damien said. They needed their father, she replied. They have him now. The federal investigation into Kingston and Vanessa had concluded. The scandal faded from headlines. The Callaway Foundation, under Celeste's leadership, had launched nationwide school grants and single-parent programs. And Callaway Dynamics? Thriving, stock at an all-time high under Davidson's steady hand. Damien sipped his coffee, gazing at his boys. You ever miss it? Celeste asked. He thought for a moment. I miss the strategy, the challenge. But I found a new challenge. She raised an eyebrow. Raising 4 tornadoes with very different minds takes more strategy than any merger ever did. She laughed. Then, without planning to, Damien blurted, Move in with me, not just for the summer, permanently. Celeste blinked. What? I want a home, a real one, with you, and the boys. Her gaze flicked toward the beach, then back to him. This is big. I know. She studied him. Why now? He took her hand. Because when I lost myself in ambition, I lost everything else. You. Them. And now I know better. A pause. Then a smile. Yes, she said softly. Let's build a real home. The boys ran up the porch, chattering about sharks and buried treasure. Damien pulled Celeste close and whispered, I finally get it. Get what? She asked. That success was never about stock prices or board seats. He looked at his sons, flushed and laughing. It was always about this. 6 months later, the launch of the Callaway Family Foundation's national initiative took place in a sunlit hall packed with educators, policymakers, and families from across the country. Banners lined the walls with slogans like, Support single parents, empower children, and building homes, not just hope. At the front of the crowd, Celeste stood at the podium, radiant and composed, her voice echoing with quiet strength. When I was raising 4 boys alone, she said, there were days I didn't think I could make it. Days I didn't know if we'd afford rent, let alone school supplies. What I didn't need was pity. I needed resources. And now, we're building those resources for every parent who feels overwhelmed but refuses to give up. Applause thundered. From the front row, Damien watched her with pride. This wasn't just his partner. She was the heart of the foundation, a woman who had turned hardship into impact. Beside him, Miles whispered, She's so cool when she talks like that. She's always cool, Rowan declared, swinging, his legs under the seat. Even when she makes broccoli, Julian muttered. Theo, as always, said nothing, but his sketchpad rested in his lap, open to a drawing of Celeste at the podium. Her hand raised, stars behind her like a comic book hero. After the event, Celeste found Damien standing by the wide windows of the hall, gazing out over the city. She came up beside him, slipping her hand into his. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Just thinking how strange it is to feel this content. Like I'm not waiting for the next big thing anymore. Like this is it. She smiled. It is. He turned to her. You should know something. What? I never felt proud standing in front of investors the way I feel now, watching you change lives. She touched his cheek. You changed. Lives too, especially 4 of them. That night, back at the townhouse, the boys burst into the kitchen still full of energy. Miles was arguing over whether their new telescope could really see Jupiter. Julian was insisting it could. Rowan had tape on both hands and glitter in his hair for no reason at all. And Theo quietly handed Damien another sketch. This time, of their whole family standing on a rocket labeled the Callaway mission. "Is this your new invention?" Damien asked with a grin. Theo nodded. "It's our family, going everywhere together." Celeste wrapped an arm around Damien's waist as he looked at the drawing. "What's our destination?" he asked. Theo shrugged. "Anywhere we want." Later, after story time and snacks and kisses on foreheads, Damien and Celeste stood in the doorway of the boys' room. The soft rise and fall of their breathing filled the room like waves. "You know," Celeste whispered. "6 months ago you couldn't even tell them apart. Now I can tell them by footsteps," she smiled. "They've changed," Damien added. "Grown. So have you." They walked quietly down the hallway, past the walls filled with the boys' artwork, past Damien's abandoned work phone, which hadn't buzzed in hours, past the dining table where robot parts and science books now lived permanently. In the living room, Damien turned to Celeste. "What if this is my legacy?" She looked confused. "The foundation?" He shook his head. "No, not the buildings. Not the press conferences, them, the boys, us, this home." She leaned in, her forehead against his. "Then you've built something that matters." Outside, the porch lights glowed against the night. Inside, 4 little dreams hummed through the rooms. And in the center of it all, Damien Callaway, once the face of a billion-dollar tech empire, finally understood. Success wasn't about being powerful. It was about being present. He hadn't stepped down. He'd stepped into something far more important. He had stepped into being a father, and everything after was just the beginning.